Well, hello everyone on this fine summer's evening. So welcome to our first event celebrating the Westminster Business Library. It's a brand new library celebrating sort of startups, freelancers and co-working spaces indeed. To celebrate the sort of launch of our library itself, I'm joined by the lovely Suzanne, who's going to be doing an awesome talk on her new book, which was actually nominated at the Business Book Awards of this year for women of color in tech. So it's a very relevant topic for this day and age, and I think it's going to be very relevant to a lot of our audiences too, talking about accessibility and to technology. But I will leave Suzanne to discuss that later as well. So we should be here for roughly an hour or so. There'll be a Q&A section at the very end. So feel free to sort of, throw your questions and answers in the section just there, or at the very end if you wish to. And then I will sort of deliver the questions to Suzanne at the very end, and we can sort of go through those together. If you have any technical problems or any sort of issues like that, feel free to email on the email that you found when I sent that to you, or in the comment section, and then hopefully my technical team will be able to handle that for you. But yeah, I don't want to delay things any further, so I will pass on to Suzanne, and she can talk about her fantastic book and that topic. So yeah, over to Suzanne. Thank you.
Chris, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, and good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to be with all of you today for the opening of the Westminster Business Library, and to talk about my book. I just wanted to personally add that it is truly an honor for me to be here because libraries have played such an integral part of my growth, not only as a person, but as a professional. Having the access to library resources, as well as to the wonderful staff members that are there, has just really made the difference in me, being the technologist that I am when I was growing up, when I was in school, and now as I continue into my profession. So a very, very heartfelt thank you to you, Reese, and to the library for having me today. So to give a little bit more background about myself, I am the author of Women of Color in Tech for John Wiley & Sons, and I am also a cloud computing specialist for Microsoft over in the United States. And I've had a wonderful time being able to talk about the lessons learned that I've had in this book, and sharing my wisdom, and also my lessons learned from transitioning into the tech industry. So for today's talk, I will talk about what is this book about? What is it hoping to do for audiences? And I'll also spend some time talking about specifically how does one transition into a tech career, or how do I try to advance that career myself, as those are the main topics of the book. So a little bit more about women of color in tech. It is designed to inform and inspire women of color to pursue tech careers. And it is based off of my own personal experiences coming into the tech industry, as well as for the amazing women that I had the opportunity to interview for the book. Up until about perhaps 6 or 7 years ago, I actually worked in a completely different profession, in a completely different capacity. I was working in administrations and operations type roles within the financial services industry. And while it paid well and I had the respect of my peers, it wasn't something that really drove me or interested me or motivated me to explore, to experiment, to do more. And I thought a lot about technology because it was something I enjoyed doing when I was younger. I was the type of person that would take apart my parents' appliances and computers to see how they work, much to their disappointment. And I've always just had that love of technology. And so I really tried to take it upon myself to think about, well, what would a tech career look like for me? And through those 6 and 7 years, I went on a journey of, meeting people, of getting new skills, and learning some very tough lessons and hardships that women of color and people of color, for that matter, often face when they're trying to get into an industry that doesn't necessarily have a lot of them already there. So the book is really to help women of color who are thinking about going into tech, either as their first career or perhaps their 10th career, and really being successful and really driving home the point that they're very much needed. There's room and there's space for you, and if you have the desire to do it, the space needs you desperately, and there are people and resources and tools that can help you along your journey. So the key themes of the book are as follows: the diversity of tech careers, preparing for tech careers, and preparing for challenges. So for diversity of tech careers, I really wanted to spend time talking about the fact that when most people think about careers in tech, it's usually thinking about coding or software engineering or something of the like. And through my own experiences and my own journey, coming to realize that tech is far more diverse in the type of work that you can do. And it permeates into so many different industries that, I can't think of any industry that isn't ingrained with tech in some way. So really talking about what are the different options should you want to pursue a tech career that marry your passions, your skills, and your interests. And how do you get into those particular fields? How do you get ready? What kind of training should you expect? What kind of environment should you expect? Really just driving home the point of this is what it looks like should you decide that this is the path that you want. And then talking about preparation. A lot of people think that the only way to get into certain fields is strictly through undergraduate or graduate study. When the reality is, when it comes to tech, it's very often getting those hands-on experiences or the diversity of experiences that make you a great tech professional. So really thinking broadly and deeply about the different ways that you can acquire these skills than just the traditional modes of study that we've mostly been taught for most of our lives. And then finally, the challenges that often come up. So it's no secret that there's a lack of women, and particularly women of color, in the industry. And part of that, has to do with the structural design of society, of access to particular opportunities, but also to access to people that will help you along the way, knowing that opportunities exist. And then when you're finally in the industry, making sure that you have the consistent support to be successful. One of the things that I found out early in writing the book was that while there were more women coming into technology, at the time there was a negative migration where women of color were actually leaving the tech industry because of the many challenges that they were facing in terms of microaggressions or not having support, not feeling like their careers are being supported, or not feeling as if their careers are even moving in any type of direction. So I wanted to spend time really talking candidly about those. And while I can't give solid answers on every challenge that will arise, really just thinking about strategies to move forward so that you can not only just be in your career, but really be successful. During the writing of the book, I talked a lot about women of color and their challenges. But after spending some time talking with many people after the release of the book, and some of the readers of the book, I noticed that there were some common themes that tend to come up, for people from diverse populations in tech. And unfortunately, these are still problems that are still happening. They're still arising, and we're making progress and working on them, but there's still challenges that collectively as a society that we need to address. So the first being, not having that access to academic and professional experiences. Part of the reason why I chose undergraduate study was that I knew that there was going to be opportunities to pursue internships or externships, things that I might not necessarily have access to if I were trying to do it on my own. But after careful reflection, just really thinking about, well, why is that? Why must one, get themselves in debt and do this just so that they can have a good career? It seems kind of counterintuitive, if you ask me. And then thinking about mentors and sponsors, and they're really an important part of your career development. And just to take a moment to explain the difference between the two, mentors are there to help you build a particular skill or a set of skills for usually a short-term amount of time. They're there to help you. They're here to help you grow, to help you design career goals. And the relationship can be formal in nature or informal in nature. But a sponsor will probably do the same thing. But here, a sponsor is going to go the extra distance in offering their social capital, their privileges, their money, resources, whatever may have you, to help advance your career to the next level. And you need both of these in your career in order to advance and to be successful. So what I was finding was that for people in diverse populations, that wasn't always the case. Sometimes, finding a sponsor is one thing, but not even being able to find a mentor to go over basic skill development, that was also really hard. There's also the lack of diverse and inclusive academic and work environments. A lot of progress has been made in increasing the diversity of talent within both of those worlds. But what we're finding is that the inclusion piece is the part that still needs to be addressed. So while, yes, people are coming in and they're coming from different places, different backgrounds, they're not necessarily feeling as if they can bring all of themselves into work, almost as if they have to cover or hide portions of themselves to assimilate to the environment that they're working in. And that's not necessarily what we want, because innovation suffers, the business suffers when people are not allowed to bring the things that make them great to, whatever project they're doing or the work that they're doing. So it's really important that that diversity and inclusivity be there. The lack of consistent and meaningful support across work and school and community environments. There was a study that was done by the Society of Women Engineers back in 2020 that showed that women of color are successful in STEM careers when they have had support from the time that they enter into primary school and throughout their careers. And that everyone is giving the message that you can do this, you will do this, you will be successful. And even beyond just the emotional support, the socioeconomic support, like making sure that they have the funds to go to school or the access to certain programs. All of that needs to be there in order for women of color and people in diverse populations to be successful. Lack of identifiable role models. I know that for myself, I never envisioned myself going into technology because I didn't really see anybody that looked like me as I was going through school and work. It was always something that someone else did, and usually it was a white cisgender male that was, in those roles. So I grew up with this mindset that this was never going to be something that I could do. It wasn't until I had that time to start networking, which I'll talk about later on in the talk, that I realized that there were more women like me than I knew. It was just, I didn't see them growing up, and I probably would have entered into tech sooner had I known them. And lack of access to computing resources and internet. And this is more of a fairly recent occurrence that has happened with the pandemic. There's always been a digital divide for people of color when it comes to having access to computing resources and the internet. And it's been exacerbated by the pandemic because now everything's gone virtual. Schooling has gone virtual, meetings have gone virtual, interviews have gone virtual. And all of this assumes that you already have that access in some way. I remember over the summer of last year trying to do a workshop virtually with Black Girls Code, which is based out in California. And I realized that as we were, doing the dry run with a couple of the students, I realized that for some of them it was an issue because they didn't have great internet access, and they also didn't have the hardware that met the minimum requirements just to run the workshop. And so that just further compounds, the challenges that they face. And then the conscious and unconscious bias that tends to happen, as well as microaggressions in certain environments. And I think that a lot of companies in the tech industry are doing a better job in addressing this. But for some, it's still a little bit more of a challenge to correct this and inspire people to be more inclusive and think about the language that they're using. So it's still a challenge that both the diverse populations need to deal with, as well as for employers to address so that people feel comfortable being there. And so and by no way, shape, or form is this the only challenges that tend to happen. Depending on where you are and what you're doing, it's probably multifold. And I knew all of this as I was making my own transition from some of my own personal experiences at school and in work. And so while I can't necessarily answer all of the challenges, I did find ways and means to combat most of them so that I can be successful. And I basically broke it down into four key components in building your career in tech. And this is, again, whether or not you're just starting or if you are trying to advance where you currently are. All of these elements are incredibly important to focus on. So there's skill development, having a continuous learning mindset, networking, and self-advocacy. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about each and their importance in addressing some of the challenges that I talked about earlier. So I think it's no surprise that because it is a technical profession or a technical career that you're looking at, skill development will always, always, always be important. You will always need to have both a mix of the technical and professional skills, or hard and soft skills that you might have heard in other places. And so technical skill can be taught. Like, you can measure it in some way, you can test for it in some way, and there's an agreed standard that this person knows this subject inside and out, and this person, may be more of a beginner or a novice. And when I think about this, I think about artificial intelligence or cloud computing or data analysis. There's some way or means to kind of test the aptitude of someone as to whether or not they know these subjects inside and out. But the part that I think people also need to remember is that the professional or soft skills are just as important, and depending on the exact career that you take into tech, perhaps far more important. And so when I say professional and soft skills, they're skills that can't necessarily be measured, and they only really come with experiences and time. So you can take courses on communication, and you can take courses on collaboration, and and so on. But it's not as if at the end of the course you're going to have become a master at these things. It sometimes takes a lot of trial and error, learning experiences in order for you to grow those particular skills. So I think about emotional intelligence and communication, collaboration, adaptability. All of those things are developed over a significant period of time as you're building your body of work and you're building yourself to the rest of your community. I know for my particular role, While it's very important for me to know cloud computing beyond just the buzzwords that you might hear about cloud computing, it's also important for me to be able to communicate complex ideas to people and to be able to collaborate with my architects and my clients and any other stakeholder that I need to deal with, because the projects that we are working on can be very complex and very expensive. So thinking about it this way, you want to focus on developing both whenever you have the opportunity to do so. And there are so many places and ways that you can get this skill development. So as the start of the talk, I talked about perhaps going back to a traditional thing of study, but you don't necessarily need that in some cases, and in other cases having that hands-on experience or having a portfolio of your work speaks far more volumes about the level of a professional that you are, versus getting a degree or a certificate. One of the resources I put on there is library resources. I can remember when I was growing up, I didn't necessarily have access to a computer or having access to a certain set of books. And so having that local library there to kind of explore and to learn more and to access it for free, it really did help open up new doors for me. And that's why libraries always hold a special place in my heart, as a place of learning and for growth. In terms of other options, there's always online courses that you can take. There's so many platforms out there that make sense, and that can cater to your cadence. Like, how often can you access the course and do work? Are you someone that can just dive right in and do it? Or are you someone that, unfortunately has a very limited amount of time and needs to get your learning in small bites? There's hackathons, which are a lot of fun. You basically go in and you're given a problem to solve. And whether it is using your technical skill or your professional skills, you work usually with a team of others to solve that problem in a very short period of time. Sometimes it can be a little stressful, but at the same time, you meet great people, you learn to hone and develop your skills as much as possible, and it helps you to become a better technical professional over time. Boot camps are also great, where you're just basically learning nonstop for a very set period of time. And don't forget about your professional experiences, so internships, apprenticeships, externships, and professional organizations are also incredibly great. For me, as I was making the transition, I was a part of many IT professional organizations like CompTIA, which does a lot of entry-level based certifications in cloud, security, and networking. And so they had many mentoring programs, many shadowing programs, things of that nature. So other things that I can access if I needed to. I also wanted to bring up skills-based volunteering. So for me, when I was making the transition, I always had the goal that I wanted to find a job, in tech, although at the time I didn't know what it was going to be. But usually the conundrum people face is that unless you already had the experience in some way, nobody really wants to hire you. So I took that, as well as my love of helping other people, and decided to pursue skill-based volunteering. So this way, I'm not only helping out a nonprofit that might not have been able to afford the work that I'm doing for them, but I'm honing in on my skill sets as well. So for many years, I was actually doing skill-based volunteering for IEEE, which is an engineering professional society, building out websites for them using WordPress. And not only was I able to give back to them so that they can help other students and others, but I also developed my web development skills in the process. So it was really great being able to do that. And so that's another avenue that can be pursued. And then finally, self-study. And that can be through the form of magazines, websites, anything that that you can just kind of pick up and learn on your own without making a major commitment is usually how I classify self-study. And there's so many avenues and opportunities for you to pursue that. And if you're deciding that tech is going to be the place that you ultimately land, self-study is going to be very much a part of your growth. So highly encouraged to pick up some self-study habits as time goes on. I talked a little bit earlier about continuous learning mindset, and this is incredibly important for anyone that's looking to stay relevant within the tech industry. Because very often the newest and latest innovation will come out, and you may find yourself at a point where your skills are now dated, and you're no longer at a place where you're competitive with some of your peers. So it's really important not only to focus on the here and the now, but to focus on emerging technologies as well. So things like artificial intelligence or cloud computing, really taking time to understand them and how to apply them. And really thinking about your education as a lifelong journey. It's not just a fixed point of, I got this degree, I got this certificate, I don't have to learn anymore. That is totally not the case, and not the case for a successful tech career. I myself have to commit to a certain number of hours of technical education and professional development education just for my job alone. So, and that's probably no different for other tech firms as well. So remembering that technology changes all the time, and in order to keep up with that, you really have to be able to pick up skills and learn things as quickly as possible. On the right-hand side, you'll see what is called a T-shape. And the recommendation that I was given, and I fully agree with, is that you want to be a T-shaped professional. So you want to make sure that you have a broad understanding of the tech space as it is, like you understand, what information technology is, understanding how computers work, on a fundamental level, how the internet works, and so on. But you also want to think about an area, a discipline, whatever the case may be. You want to think about what's going to really excite you to get to know further, so that you can be that subject matter expert in that particular field. So for me, it's cloud computing. I enjoy talking about cloud because it's both a business discussion as well as a technical discussion. And it can be a lot of fun, and no two projects are the same. And I know that for some people it's data science, and for some people it's business analysis. Whatever the case may be, you want to make sure that you're thinking about the thing that really excites you, as well as understanding the broad ecosystem that is tech, and really making sure that at a fundamental level that you can talk about those concepts and ideas. Networking. I definitely had to put this in here because it was one of two big misconceptions that I had to change about myself. And so networking is just taking the opportunity to, meet others, understand like the projects that they're working on, and seeing where there's mutual connection between you. I will tell you that when I first started on this endeavor of changing careers, I mistakenly thought that all I needed to do was just develop my skill and everything else would follow. That is not true. I have not seen that be true for anybody that has worked at tech. It's what the slide says. It's not who you know, but who knows you and your work. And it becomes so much more important as you're applying for jobs and trying to set yourself apart from all of the other people who are also competing. So networking is really important for professional development, not only in a tech career, but whatever industry or profession that you choose. So some of the benefits are you get great advice and information. You can usually learn from people very quickly whether or not a particular profession is something that you want to spend your time and energy devoting yourself to, or maybe this is something that you should put a pin in and look at other opportunities. So people that are working in the field will tell you very quickly, what's good, what's bad, and what you should, avoid at all costs. So you're getting that real-time advice and information that you probably wouldn't get from other places. You're also open to more opportunities. So projects, mentorships, jobs, all of these things are not necessarily advertised in certain places. So sometimes there's someone that has that inside knowledge that would share it with you. So they'll be like, hey, there's an opportunity with my company that I think you'd be great for. I'd be happy to make that referral for you. And having that relationship gives you a little bit more of an edge versus someone that doesn't have that relationship or doesn't have that firsthand knowledge about the position or the company. So it's really something to think about. It also offers the opportunity for mentors and sponsors. As I alluded to in the first part of the talk, you really need both to continue to develop your skills and really propel your career further. And sponsorship is perhaps particularly important if, let's say, you're at a point in your career where you're not seeing the movement that you'd like to see. Like, you can go to your sponsor and ask the question, well, what am I doing wrong here? What should I be thinking about differently? And they can give you that honest advice, as well as be the champion for you in rooms or meetings that you may not necessarily have access to on your own. So being able to network, you can find those people who are able to be both your mentors and your sponsors over time. And perhaps more importantly, support during challenging times. I will be honest in saying that the 6-year journey that it took me to get to here was really hard. There were nights that I was challenged by coursework. There were nights that I was challenged by work. There's nights that I was challenged by people. And, while at one point you do have to kind of develop a resiliency, sometimes it's just good to know that there are people that you can just talk to and share things with and feel like you're in a safe space, so that while they may not have an answer for you about how to deal with this situation, at least you know that you are being heard in an emotionally safe place, and that they're here for you. And sometimes that alone can make all the difference. In the book, I mention a particular moment where I did something very uncharacteristic, and I ended up yelling at a boss, and I felt horrible. And even though I knew that I was, 1 foot out the door with this particular job, and I didn't love it, and I was on to great things, I really felt as if, like, as a professional, that was not something I wanted anyone to ever see or think less of me. And it was from one of my best mentors that just assured me, like, I get it, Susanne. I totally get it. Don't browbeat yourself about this. You're human. And, like, just understand what is going to be your next path forward. Like, what would you do differently, and just keep moving. And again, it didn't solve the central issue. I still had to go to work on Monday. I still had to deal with the person that I had the interaction with, but I felt better and more confident that I have the tools to be successful. I have somebody in my corner, and I can confidently move on from this particular point in my career and on to bigger and better things. So having your network is crucial in so many ways, beyond just the advice, the information, and opportunities that can arise, but really to develop, hopefully, some lifelong relationships that will transcend your career. Now, in terms of how to network, I know that that's a little bit difficult to do, because while some places have opened up, not all have, and we're still at a point where in-person meetings are still very difficult to do. That isn't to say, though, that you shouldn't try to network online. And in fact, one of the places that I actively recommend people reaching out to is LinkedIn, if you're not using it already. LinkedIn is my go-to not only for making updates, but it's also to meet people, to learn from them, to see what they're posting and how I can learn from them and grow as a professional. So I totally recommend LinkedIn if you haven't already used it. There's also a networking site called Xing, Xing, that works on the same premise of business networking, which I also recommend. Just reaching out, talking to people, asking for a couple of minutes of their time just to understand their careers, what they love, what they didn't love, what they would prefer that they did better. Just making those connections online is just as important. And even for the online events, I noticed that many are using virtual breakout rooms to hold networking events, or some kind of chat feature where you can communicate with people. I would strongly encourage that the next time you're at a professional event where that's available, to utilize it, because you never know the connections that you can make, and where you can go from there. And in terms of, how do you break that initial ice of reaching out to a random stranger and just saying, hey, usually some of the strategies I use is, taking a look at their body of work and saying, hey, I see that you've been working on this fantastic project. Would love to hear, more about the work that you're doing. Would you have a couple of minutes to talk? Or asking about what projects that they're working on. It doesn't have to be as daunting as we sometimes may think it is. I know that for me, networking was perhaps one of the more difficult skills for me to learn. But it was a very valuable one, and one that I strongly suggest that for anyone that's on here, to take the time to develop and grow your network. And I also encourage you, I have all my information at the end, but totally encourage you to reach out to me as well. And then finally, self-advocacy, which was the other hard lesson that I had to learn. The other misconception that I had when I was making this transition was that if I did the work, if I did all of the work, that good things just automatically follow. So if I did great work, I got the promotion. If I did great work, I got the project that I wanted to work on. And all of this would happen on its own without any effort or any intervention. And I quickly learned that that was not the case. And it was a mistake that I kept repeating throughout my career. And I learned that I had to be my own career advocate, meaning I had to put out there what I wanted out of my career, where I saw my career, and make sure that I let people know this on a regular basis, as well as celebrating my achievements, as well as talking about my accomplishments, and without feeling as if I'm being arrogant in some way. I remember very clearly that one of the last jobs that I had in financial services, I gave my employer my notice, and he asked, well, can you give me a reason why? And I said, well, I really wanted to have an advancement opportunity, and it never happened. And he just replied, like, I wish you would have told me that, because I would have tried to make it happen. I think sometimes we assume that our bosses automatically know what we want. Our mentors and our sponsors know what we want, but sometimes they don't. And sometimes they have their own struggles and battles that they have to contend with. So it's really important that you are intentional and expressing often what you want out of your career and what you need from people in order for you to be successful. You should make sure that you scream loud and proud your accomplishments and your achievements. One of the beauties about LinkedIn and social media in general is that it gives you that personalized platform to do that, to talk about the things that are important to you and the things that you're accomplishing. So strongly encouraging to share that as much as possible. And you should ask for opportunity. You can't always wait for opportunity to present itself to you, because sometimes you'll be waiting for a very long time and nothing will happen. So having the conversations with your managers, your mentors, your sponsors, your peers, anyone that has a vested interest in your career, those are the people that you should be having conversations with about wanting to move in the next step of your career, or what more that you want out of it. The more often that you're vocal about it, the high likelihood that it's going to happen to you, but people won't know until you tell them. So everyone, thank you so much for your time. That's the end of my comments for today. Would love the opportunity to take any questions that the audience may have.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Susan. That was really insightful, actually. And there was a lot of things there that I didn't think of myself when I was sort of like thinking about this topic in general. So yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure. We do have a couple of questions that have been placed in the Q&A. One of them actually was one I was actually going to think of asking myself. That's quite interesting. So they've asked about obviously you have a very sort of US centric nature to your discussion, and sort of how does this sort of field change in accordance to sort of like other regions, like in Europe or other parts of the world? Can this sort of be applied elsewhere, or is this, or does it change as such? And they wanted to know, and I'm curious about that too. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the great things that has come out of this opportunity to write the book is that I've had a number of conversations with diverse audiences outside of the United States, having conversations with people in Austria, Canada, and at one point Russia. So there's definitely a commonality for the fact that there is definitely a dearth of diverse populations within the tech industry. And I think that what may have to change is the way how individual countries may approach to do that. And I'm talking from the employer perspective, because there are certain things in place in the United States to kind of combat that wouldn't necessarily be translatable for Austria or the UK. There's definitely differences in approach from an employment law standpoint. That being said, I think that the general advice for people looking to transition, I think that's true regardless of where you are. Like, the only way that you're going to get people to know who you are is if you tell them and you display this or broadcast this in some way. And you do have to be your own career advocate. I think that's a universal thing, and I don't think it's necessarily applicable to tech. So I think that the majority of the things that I talk about in this particular talk are for anybody, regardless of whether you happen to be a woman of color, if you're just starting a new tech job, if you're looking to transition. All of these things are going to be relevant for you in some way or form.
Okay, awesome. That's good. I think it's definite when I think a lot of it is about confidence. Well, I think when you're sort of exploring other fields, you don't know if it's because it's a foreign field, whether it'll be the same or not. But I guess the economy that we have is quite globalized in a sense. So a lot of these things do interchange together. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, we have another question. So someone saying they're struggling with networking, but how can they sort of make steps to improve this, and like how can they hold themselves accountable? So sort of how do they know when they're not doing good networking, and how they handle that and bad networking communities? Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I definitely struggled with that when I was first going to networking sessions. So it's a little difficult because networking assumes that the person that you're working with is also coming in with best intentions and is willing to have a conversation. And sometimes that's not true. Sometimes their agenda is a little different. So like, I remember when I first started networking, I was encountering people that only wanted to speak to people who were senior level managers or C-level or above. They didn't want to talk to anybody else. And so when I tried to initiate conversation with people like that, like you can tell that they didn't want to engage with me. So sometimes, like, even if you have the best of intentions, you have to understand that you have to have a willing participant to get better. That being said, that doesn't let you off the hook for not developing your networking skills. So I say the first thing is to hold yourself accountable. Always go to the networking event, like, because that's what I would do. Like, I would come home from work, I'm too tired, I'm not going to go, and I'm like, no, you have to go. So go.
So you
Go,
got to push yourself to do it.
go, like, go to the event, but make it a goal of just saying, I'll talk to one person. Let me start small and just talk to one person. And then rather than talk about like work or something to that effect, you can ask something like, well, hey, what project are you working on? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So like you can just make it as vague as possible, so if they don't want to get into a conversation about work, they don't have to. And they can kind of leave it open-ended. So leading to my next thing of ask open-ended questions. Like, don't ask questions that are going to end in a yes, no, because that's not going to really facilitate dialogue. Going with somebody, like having a networking buddy or several people, also takes the pressure off of you, because sometimes I feel very self-conscious when I'm alone. I keep talking, and then your buddy's just like, slow down, relax, you're good, you're in a safe space, don't worry, like, I've got you. So sometimes having help can also be great. And just keep conversations as light as possible. You don't need to go into heavy subjects. And you can always excuse yourself from conversations that you don't like, you feel are just like draining you or taking your energy. You can politely say like, oh, I have to go make a phone call, but it was really nice chatting with you, and and kind of move forward. But I think that the crux of all this is to say, to get better at networking, you have to network. And so that's why it starts with the first thing of go to networking events as often as you can, and just have the goal of interacting with one person and start from there. And I promise it does get easier over time.
See, no, I think it's true. I think a lot of it is sort of building up familiarity. Sort of the more you do it, the more comfortable you are with it. So it might just be a case of practicing until sort of near perfection, in a sense.
Exactly.
Let's see. Yeah, so we've got another question. Sort of, well, this is actually quite interesting because I wasn't sure about this either. And they were asking, sort of, how do you go about finding a mentor or a sponsor? Like, or what is that process? How does that actually work?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So for mentors, you could have the opportunity, depending on where you are. There are professional organizations that have mentoring programs. There are schools that have formal mentoring programs. A number of different places that offer that, whether through the professional organization, employment, or something of that nature. But I do realize that sometimes those avenues are not available to you. So like you may work with an employer that doesn't have such a thing. So there's the informal mentorship, where you just think about someone who you really admire, like from a skills perspective, from a professional perspective. Really think about who that person is, and just reach out to them and ask, like, hey, I've really been admiring the work that you've been doing. I've been, trying to find someone to have a mentoring relationship. Would you be open to a conversation about that? And there's no harm in asking, like, because the worst they can do is say, no, I don't have the time, or no, I'm not the appropriate person. But you don't have to wait until the stars are aligned and someone puts a program in to ask for an informal mentor. You can ask for an informal mentor right after this meeting, if there's somebody that you have in mind. But the thing is to just make that initial ask and have a conversation to see if it's going to work. Sponsorship, though, is a little different, and it's a little tricky. And I actually place more of the onus on this with employers, because if a sponsor is going to be using their privileges and resources to help you, they have to see your work. They have to know that you're a performer, that you've been, doing the work, you've been putting in the effort, you've got high performance written all over you. You can't just like ask somebody out of the blue, like, hey, sponsor me, like give me the C-level job, like because the reason why you can't do that is that every time a sponsor does something like that, they're putting a little bit of risk on them. So, and most of the time it's reputational risk. So if God forbid it doesn't work out, it's on them, not you. So that's why it's a little more difficult to initially find a sponsor. Sponsorship is something that I believe that's something that you have to kind of build and work up to. A mentor may eventually become a sponsor over time, and I've had that happen to me. But you've got to build up to that versus just coming right out with the ask.
Okay, I see. So I guess it's I guess it's a little bit like networking in a similar sort of way. You sort of have to sort of extend your reach, put yourself out there in a sense. You make that first step to sort of bridge that gap. Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, we've got another question here asking about sort of transition. So I think this person says they're in tech, but they don't like what they do. They want to do more technical stuff within their career. So like, how do they make transitions, I guess, within the industry to get themselves more involved in what they want to actually do?
Absolutely. So I think the best place to start sometimes from there is to reach out to someone that is doing the job that you ideally will want to do, because they will tell you what you need to be doing to better prepare yourself. So like they'll take a look at your background, your resume or portfolio or what have you, and say, this is great, but if you're thinking about this particular tech career, these are some of the things that you might want to think about building out to be more competitive for employers to kind of take reach of you. And so that way you can decide, well, do I want to spend time developing those skills? Do I want to spend time getting those experiences? Or, do I want to try to pivot into something different? So that's why I say it's better to try to find someone to ask, like, what do I need to be doing? So that could be somebody in your network. That could be a recruiter to just kind of give you some like low stakes advice about where they think you need to go. It could be a classmate, it could be anybody, but just really getting that insight, asking someone who has that insight and asking for their honest feedback and opinion. And then once you have that, making the decision about, do I do self-study? Do I engage in a program? Like figuring out what is going to be the best way for you to go ahead and develop that skill set, and then going about the process of actually applying to the jobs.
I see. So a lot of it's about identifying, essentially, knowing your landscape.
Well, yeah, because I think sometimes what ends up happening is that people have an idea of what they think their career is going to be, without really thinking holistically from, what do I value from work? What do I value from the job that I do? What do I need at a bare minimum to be happy? Because sometimes, like, if you're unhappy from where you are, it's like everything looks great. It looks really fantastic. But you often have to stop and ask yourself, well, what does great look like? What does look ideal for me, and what's going to make sense given where I'm at in my career? So, you should definitely, I'm definitely a person that feels that if you're unhappy with your current station, by all means, you should think about what the next step is going to be. But you want to think about it thoughtfully. Like, you really want to put in the time of thinking about, do I have the energy to learn new skills? Do I have the energy to network? Do I have the energy to do certifications? Do I have it in me right now? Or should I come back to this at another point?
I see. Okay. Really interesting. Yeah. So we've got no more questions, but I had a couple of my own if I could just squeeze in. Got about 5 minutes left, so I thought I'd give it a go. Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, what in your opinion has been your sort of bigger stumbling block, like your major hurdle, like as you transitioned and moved up different levels and moved across different levels, like has there been like a massive hurdle that you've sort of hit across that's been that you've been puzzled over? Or, yeah.
I think the biggest hurdle I've had in the past and I do now is, and I think you hit on it, it's confidence in myself and my abilities. When I was first beginning and learning, I was very hard on myself when I wasn't picking things up as quickly as I thought I could be. And even though people would tell me like, Suzanne, you're doing awesome, you're doing great, there was still this part of me that was just like, you're just being nice, you're just being nice, you're just being nice. So just really having that core like confidence in myself, in my abilities to perform my job, to help others, I think has always been the biggest stumbling block for myself. And it's something I continuously work on because, it's never perfect and there's always things that you have to try to improve. And I try to keep telling myself that like, if I were truly, truly bad at something, my bosses would tell me, like just out of like pure kindness and professionalism, they would tell me like, you suck at this, Suzanne. But but like, no, you are doing good, and you should believe in that, and just like embracing my mistakes for what they are. Like just because I stumble and I mess something up, that does not mean I'm not a good technologist. It just means like, hey, maybe you need to spend more time thinking about, making the skill a little bit sharper or whatever the case may be. So not interpreting every failure, every mistake as you're a bad person and you suck at your job, but more of like, these are learning opportunities to help you grow as a professional.
I guess that sort of motto, like every challenge is an opportunity in a sense. Like you just got to sort of like look positively through the negative things, I suppose. But yeah, like one final question I had was more about sort of crowdfunding and sort of like investment. I think that's always the biggest question we have for startups and sort of like freelancers, and like how easy is it to sort of do crowdfunding, and like how much support do you require from it in that sort of sense?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about that in the book because I do find that for many, when it comes to subsidizing, your education or project, crowdfunding is a source when traditional options are not necessarily available. I would say that you really have to have a very compelling story as to why people should donate to your particular cause or project. And then B, you have to really be prepared to market and promote. I think sometimes that people mistakenly believe that when you post something, on social media like that, like once or twice, that is in the promotion in and of itself. But if you're talking about really reaching critical mass and having other people, donate money and, finding influencers and everything else, you have to do it often, and you do need to have a strategy if you're deciding to go the crowdfunding route. So, definitely do it, but just keep those things in mind and have a realistic expectation as to what you should expect as like funding. So if you're going in thinking I'm going to get $10 million, for this project or idea, like that might be a hard challenge. But having said that, if you're going in thinking that you're going to get $10,000 for a particular, project or challenge, that may also be hard to do if you don't already have a full level of supporters who are both donating and then promoting you as well. So just something to think about.
Okay, I see. So yeah, you really got to have a plan, I guess, or a proper fleshed out plan.
Yeah, it's almost like its own form of running a business, like they say for most businesses, you should have a plan about how you will go ahead and execute the things that you're going to do. And a crowdfunding campaign is no different, because you have to think about, again, your story. How are you going to, convince people? How many times are you going to post? Where are you going to post? Your platform, all of these things you have to think about.
Okay, interesting. Well, thank you for that, Susanne. I think we've got about a minute left. So if you had any further tidbits to to offer us. I know you've given us a lot of insight already. So, yeah.
No, only to say that honestly, this was of all of the wonderful experiences that I've had in my career, this is definitely up there to be asked to speak. And I thank you and everyone for attending. Your time is valuable and precious, and so thank you for spending it with me. And as I mentioned, in terms of networking, I'm here to network as well. So feel free to reach out to me anytime.
No, definitely. I'll put your website in the chat so everyone can see it as well. Yeah, and I think any other links that I think you mentioned a few like networking, like Zoom, for example, a few other networking sites. We'll definitely send an email out to all our attendees and everyone else, so they can get the best benefit from this. But yeah, really thank you, Susanne, for joining us today. It's a great time to sort of launch sort of our business library, and it's been a pleasure to sort of have you here. Especially spend your time with us. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. My sincere pleasure.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for attending. We'll have more events talking about the Westminster Business Library in the future, focusing on tech and also on the world of sort of startups and freelancers too. So yeah, thank you very much for attending. If you want to check out more Susanne's material, then I've put the link in the chat so you can have a look there and browse on her resources and her books as well. But yeah, thank you everyone for attending. It's been a pleasure. So yeah, thank you. I hope to see you in the future. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.